language. They say it has been secured. It's, it's good morning, everybody. It's Firearms Friday. And this morning we're going to be talking about, shitheads that don't know what they're talking about. And it's and I just got derailed when I saw this comment pop up. Uncle Steve has first blood this morning, and I was teasing him yesterday about using the caps lock. But to be fair, Uncle Steve, that was a joke at your expense that maybe 3 viewers got, because I was actually making a reference to a novel series where the guy's cat always texts in all caps, and it's a constant running joke that every time they do the text, the cat is shouting. But I've got Cameron with us this morning. We're going to talk about a story that Cameron brought to my attention. To be fair,
don't blame me.
Don't
blame me.
Now, I think this is a somewhat older interview, maybe a year or so old. I believe I saw it before, but because we're going to be talking about gun control stuff coming up between all the hearings and some of the questions that were asked of Kash Patel vis-a-vis the relationship between the FBI and the absolute criminal monstrosity that is the ATF, that wretched hive of villainy and deceit. We'll be bringing up stories like this more and more as we go forward. So Cameron, do you want to set it up a little bit before I play the video, or you want to just go straight into the clip?
Let's just go straight into the video. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do this.
The truth is that kitchen knives are perhaps 25% of the knives used in most of the terrible crimes. That's one of the stats in the films. And those kitchen knives are usually a domestic situation. Okay. So kitchen knives, of course, it's very difficult. They're a domestic knife. I do think there is areas of innovation that we can do with kitchen knives. I hate to say it, not all kitchen knives need to have a point on them. That sounds like a crazy thing to say, but actually it would reduce. You can still cut your food without the point on the knife, which is an innovative way to sort of look at it. And in a country in crisis, I'm sorry, but yeah, let's look at that. But the truth is, all knives, the loophole on the heritage knives allows the sale of ninja swords to be sold. So while, you've got your granddad's sword on there and you want that, that's fine, of course, but it is leaving a loophole for someone to carry a ninja sword. So let's ban them all. And if you have one of those knives, get a license for it. Simple as that. And I think it's a small contribution to society if you say, all right, I'm going to back that. I'll get a license for my granddad's sword, because it is leaving, these kids vulnerable. The truth is,
and he did the meme. You got a license for that?
You got a license for that, right? More than half of all states in the United States now are so-called constitutional carry states, which is to say you do not require a license to carry a firearm. And of course, the idea that there exist states which are signatories to the ratification of the Constitution of the United States, which includes the Second Amendment, and some of these states may issue and actually have licenses. We live in Georgia. Georgia you can still get a Georgia weapons license, a Georgia carry license, but the law does not require you to have one. The only value in having a Georgia concealed carry license now is that it represents a background check. So, having a license just makes it easier to purchase a firearm. It means that you don't have to go through the whole background check deal. But this man is suggesting that you should have to purchase a license from the government to stock your kitchen cutlery.
Well, it's your granddad's old World War II sword, too, right?
And I'm sorry. Where in the hell are people just carrying ninja swords around on the streets in London?
That sounds like the kind of place I'd want to be.
Right?
So, look, I I wanted to bring this up for a couple of reasons. One, we've said over and over and over again that not only do we need to stop ceding ground on gun control, that one of the biggest mistakes Donald Trump made in his first administration was banning the bump stocks, and he did it because he was trying to make a peace offering and have good faith negotiations with the other side. You know, I get all that, but we've said you need to stop ceding ground on gun control, and we actually need to start pushing back and start repealing gun control laws, because it is never going to be enough. It's already Cindy, that was excellent. that derailed me. That was good, Cindy. Wow, that almost did derail me. Okay, here we go.
It's already psychotically the case that the government's too involved. What's up, GCO?
I'm back. Okay. It's never enough gun control. In England, it's already virtually impossible to own a firearm legally. Like, you got a license for that. Like, in England, like, they've got all this weird stuff where, at least here in the state of Georgia, you know, if you get a license to carry guns, like, you're pretty much covered with just about any gun you would want to carry. And of course, because of the constitutional carry law, if you wish to open carry your gun, you don't even need a license for that. The only exception is if you wish to purchase a machine gun, then you got to go through the federal government and get the whole FFA thing, and it's kind of a pain in the dick, and it's that way on purpose, by the by. But in England, like, if you possess 3 shotguns, you have to have a license for each shotgun. Okay, it's madness, right? They're gun control gangsta's paradise over there. And now they're coming after the knives. And this is a thing that Chris and I have talked about in this channel, on this segment, forever. That it's ridiculous. And I saw this thing from Idris Elba, and I was like, you know, this is something we haven't discussed in a while. This is why it's important, because here's a man who's reasonably well spoken. I'm not going to call him a genius, but he doesn't appear to be an outright idiot.
No, he's not.
Well, no, but he doesn't appear to have like a sub 90 IQ. You know, like, he can put words together more gooder. He can do that.
Correct.
And
he's a midwit.
And he's a
midwit. He's a person who is sufficiently articulate that he believes himself to be intelligent because he knows words.
So anyhow, here we are, and he believes, he came across as very sincere and genuine, that he's making a reasonable, somewhat nuanced, maybe a bit radical, difficult for some people to hear. Like, that's why he even kind of smirks and is like, you know, it sounds kind of odd not to have a point on your knife, but hey, you don't have to have a point on your knife for it to be a knife to cut things. And it's madness. And, you know, if we're willing to look at radical solutions for why there are, and let's say, domestic violence situations and violence situations in England, if we're willing to look at things being in England unlicensed and unregulated being part of the reason why England has a crime problem, okay, I'll play that game. What else has England had an influx of over the past decade that might have caused a spike in crime?
Muslims.
Yeah. See, I set it up, and Chris knocked it down. That was phenomenal. So,
I think you were looking for illegal immigrants, but let's be real. It is in fact a particular segment of illegal immigrants.
People that won't assimilate into the culture.
Correct.
And is what it amounts to. It's the age-old immigration argument into anywhere.
And it's important to point out in this context, especially, that the Muslims are the problem, because what Idris Elba is talking about is the passing of laws. And what makes Muslims a problem in Europe with the uncontrolled immigration maneuver is that they huddle together in conclaves, and they do not recognize British law. They operate themselves under Sharia law. They do not recognize that the British government has authority to enforce laws over them.
Yeah, they become de facto city-states.
Yeah, one of the reasons that the rape gangs, child abuse gangs that we've been hearing so much about in the news lately are a big problem in the UK is because these Muslim enclaves, which operate under Sharia law does not criminalize that behavior. That activity is not only tolerated and accepted, but it's encouraged as part of their religion and as part of Sharia law.
Yeah. So, and look, we don't have to spend the whole show on it. It just
no, we don't.
I saw this come across, and it so beautifully encapsulates. Mark Levin wrote in Liberty and Tyranny that the problem with the statist is that the statist is always right. And if things don't go right, the statist always comes back and says, well, I just need a little more power. I just need a little more control. The problem is not that this was a bad idea. The problem is I didn't have sufficient authority to implement my good idea. And now that
we need to govern you harder.
Right. And now that England has effectively made gun ownership next to impossible, and the violent crime hasn't gone away, it's just shifted to a different weapon of choice. Instead of focusing on the criminal, they're focusing on the weapon. And now they're like, well, if you want to chop up the veggies for your toad in a hole, you're gonna have to do that with a knife that doesn't have a point. And okay, buddy, but whatever you guys say, sure.
And, funny thing, there are knives that one uses in a kitchen, which do not have a sharp tip, right? Like, for example, a butcher's cleaver. Here's a great example of a knife that doesn't have. Oh, well, disable your camera real quick so they can see. It's just a blunt edge. Yeah, I'm sure you can't do any damage with that, can you? Right?
Well, assault is already illegal. Assault is already illegal, basically in everything from the lowest tier shithole country to the absolute top tier countries. Doesn't matter where you're at. Assault is illegal, and assault with a deadly weapon tends to be double illegal. Every country on earth, no exceptions. But it's the knife. It's always the knife. And if you don't think that sort of madness will come here if we continue to cede ground on gun control, you are wrong. One thing that the left, that the people that wish to consolidate power are willing to do is to play the long game. They talked about bringing universal health care to America for a century, and then were more than happy to pass the ACA, which they understood to be a step in that journey, an important step in that journey, but they understood it to be a step in that journey, and they're willing to let the ACA rot for another 10 to 20 years before they can take the next step. Well, we tried. Now, I guess you need to give us a little more control, a little more power over you stupid little plebes. So it just made the point for me. All gun control is bad. Rescind all gun control. Arm the world. Oh, and thanks for bringing up Dexter Taylor last week. See, I found a way to say his name. I'm determined to make it a point. Like I realize Dexter Taylor's charged under state law. Trump can't pardon him, but Trump can use the bully pulpit and shine a spotlight on the case.
Yes, and we can use our platform to try and get some awareness there.
Dude was just a nerd who liked building guns. Come on.
Exactly. But he made the mistake of living in New York City, and that's just not good. All right, let's move on to Kash Patel. Yesterday, they were doing the confirmation hearings for Kash Patel, and there's one exchange in particular that I want to take a look at, but I want to start with this one because
But not the racist one?
it was.
We're not going to watch the
not that one.
racist clip, are we?
No,
Are
we're
you
not going
sure?
to watch
That
that
clip's
one.
fantastic.
It is. It is fantastic.
Would YouTube strike us? Would that happen?
I don't know.
I'm not going to say the word.
Because I saw it on YouTube. I saw another platform run that clip with him saying that somebody called me a sand N-word on YouTube. So I don't know what the rules are anymore. It's just whatever. and you know what? If there's no more rules, I'm good with that too. That works out for us. But
okay, I'm going to stop derailing us. Yes,
this is the clip that I want to share to begin with because it's just such a boss moment for Kash.
The rest of the interview. This is why snippets of information are often misleading and detrimental to this committee's advice and consent process.
If you consent, I would love to have 5 hours of questions, and then I could read the whole transcript.
You've got 2 minutes.
That one just made me happy. I got a real.
All these people know they work. All these people know they work for Trump, and Amy Klobuchar is just apparently.
Oh, yeah, she's awful. She's absolutely awful. Oh,
don't worry, Mazie Hirono decided to be even worse.
God, she is.
You need to sit down and shut up. Yes.
That woman is, I mean, that you can see her speak and then vote for her is all the reason I need for there to only be 49 states.
Yeah. No.
Why it should be ejected from the union because it contains enough people to vote for that person. She is not the product of the public education system. She is the product of the public education system.
Yeah, copy of a copy of a copy. Yeah, she's.
Yeah, well, more like a bunch of civilians ate government shit and then shat the shit that came from that shit, and there she shits.
Yes, it fumes and vapor. Right.
Yeah, but this one,
you believe that background checks for firearm purchases are constitutional?
Let me back that up so you hear the question. So this is Senator Padilla. I hate this player.
Do you believe that background checks for firearm purchases are constitutional?
Okay, before Kash answers, let me tell you the correct answer.
No.
Background checks are unconstitutional. Okay, the Second Amendment, yes, the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed.
Yeah, these are.
What are you doing? I didn't give you permission to do whatever that is.
Tell.
The Second Amendment says that it shall not be infringed. Which is to say to infringe, right? That picture of Kim Jong-il there, right? That is infringed by a frame. The word infringe means to place something adjacent to surround a thing with, infringe. No law which references firearms can be interpreted intelligently to be constitutionally tolerable. And that's just on the Second Amendment. Let's not forget, we also have the Fourth Amendment to be secure in our persons, properties, and papers. Okay? The universal background check is a warrantless search. It is an illegal, unconstitutional invasion of your personal property and paper. It's unacceptable under all circumstances. So let's go back to the clip and listen to Cash's answer.
Do you believe that background checks for firearm purchases are constitutional?
I don't know the in-depths of it, but I think that's what the Supreme Court has said, Senator.
So the word.
Now, unfortunately, the fact is that his answer is the correct answer. In this particular context, it is the correct answer because he's not being questioned. He's not being questioned to be confirmed as a person whose job it is to interpret the law and to write legal opinions on the law. He's being questioned as a person whose job it will be to oversee the enforcers of the law as it is written. Right? Which I have a little trouble with that, because what I would love to see is for Kash to get in there and just say, hey, we're just not going to enforce this law. Now, the president has that authority. Famously, Obama used that authority to create the DACA program, the Dreamers Act, where he just instructed the Border Patrol and ICE not to deport certain people. He just, you know what? We're just gonna let these slide. We're just gonna let these ones slide. We'll let them go. We'll just let them go. So Donald Trump could just say, you know what? The whole background checks thing, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. We're just not going to enforce that law anymore. He can't make the law go away on his own, but he can refuse to allow it to be enforced. But again, Cash's answer here is a technically correct answer because of the nature of the job that he's going into. It is a politic answer. And as much as I would prefer him to just say, yes, the background check is unconstitutional, he's not. Well, he's not there to be a judge.
Well, it's not just a technically correct answer. It's a politically savvy one. The fact that he can correctly point to the Supreme Court, and he's basically saying, why are you asking me? This is a question for John Roberts. Or maybe the next time a Supreme Court nominee comes through these Senate chambers, maybe that's a good question for them. So we talked about this with the RFK thing. They're deliberately trying to create these dividing lines between Trump and his appointees because,
right.
Of course, none of these people are in 100% agreement on everything, and they're trying to get these guys to publicly contradict Donald Trump. It's why they hammered RFK on the abortion thing so hard the other day. And it's the same thing here. They're trying to create a controversy. You know, not the biggest fan of Mitt Romney. I think we can all agree there, okay? However, you recall when George Stephanopoulos asked Mitt Romney a question about birth control, and Mitt Romney's answer, and he seemed genuinely confused. Like, George, why are you even asking me about this? Because it's just not part of the Republican platform at all, one way or another. And, you know, I learned a really valuable lesson about how the corporate media poisons the well on our national discourse by I'm just asking questions. Well, George Stephanopoulos was just asking a question, but as soon as he asked the question, he made it an issue. And it's the same thing here. They're asking Kash this type of question in order to create the controversy. That's why I actually think that this was a brilliant answer. Like, because you saw him pause and really think about, like, okay, how far do I want to go here? And he landed on essentially say, hey, that's not what I said. It's what the Supreme Court said. That's why I think that this was such a savvy answer.
And this goes on. And Padilla's basically fishing for a soundbite. That's all these assholes.
Of course.
YES. Yes. Can you say yes? Are background checks constitutional?
I can say whatever the Constitution and the Supreme Court ruled is.
I want y'all to listen to
Firearm
this.
purchases.
Okay, so
you believe that
back to
background
asking the
checks for
question.
firearm purchases are constitutional?
I don't know the in-depths of it, but I think that's what the Supreme Court has said, Senator.
So the word would be yes. Yes. Can you say yes? Are background checks constitutional?
I can say whatever the Constitution and the Supreme Court ruled is the rule of the land.
And what is the law of the land at the moment?
Listen to that smug. Oh,
I'm not an expert on state-by-state background
You're
checks.
going to be universal background checks. Well,
that's different.
I think actually your answer is pretty telling. Let me ask you another question. Do you believe that civilian ownership of machine guns are protected by the Second Amendment?
And the correct answer to that question is yes. The civilian ownership of machine guns is 100% absolutely protected by the Second Amendment. The law in its current iteration does not read that way. The law has the courts have decided that is not what the law says. But let's be real. The Constitution also says no income tax. The Constitution says that there can't be an income tax. Now, there's an interesting distinction. There's a very interesting difference between the existence of the unconstitutional income tax and the existence of the unconstitutional ban on civilian-owned machine guns. Cameron, do you know what that difference is? I'm sure you could point to it.
Yeah, we passed an amendment to the Constitution.
Correct. That's right. Just like the federal regulation of controlled substances, which is a power not enumerated to the federal government, but there are laws on the books which restrict access to substances like marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, etc. And this is not a full-throated defense or recommendation of the use of illicit recreational drugs, but the fact of the matter is, constitutionally, the federal government has no authority to do that. And guess what? There was an amendment to prohibit alcohol.
And then there was another amendment.
With an amendment. And there had to be an amendment precisely because that is not an authority which is enumerated and afforded to the federal government. The enforcement of any drug law, right? Even if you don't find the laws offensive in and of themselves, they are offensive to the Constitution. That is not an authority that the federal government has. That is an authority that it has usurped surreptitiously and illegally. And frankly, any police officer that's ever arrested a person for the possession of alcohol, tobacco, or firearms or illicit drugs of any kind has committed a violation of Section 242, suppression of civil liberties under color of law. He is a criminal, right? So that's anarchy. That would be a fun conversation, but I can tell you right now that the whole federal government is not unconstitutional. There are parts of the federal government that were literally created by the Constitution, but the federal government broadly has dramatically overreached its enumerated authorities. Go ahead, Cameron.
You mentioned the drug dealers. We finally had a DGU where a drug deal went bad last week, and of course I wasn't here for it. And I appreciate the fact that you shouted me out that's something that I've been on for years on this segment. But
so, this goes on with him fishing for sound bites. But I just wanted to talk about it a little bit and talk about the story.
Universal background checks.
What an absolute shitheel this guy is.
Well, he gave the game away because you heard him mention universal background checks, which
right.
And again, I feel like Kash gave a very savvy answer where he's like, well, look, I don't know how all, excuse me, okay, sorry about that, guys. Again, he gave a very savvy answer where he said, well, look, I don't know how 50 different sets of background checks work, which is again correct, because once once you have a universal background check, sounds like this. Well, if we're going to have background checks, why not have one universal system? Sounds reasonable enough, except what that really is a federal gun registry. That's the only reason they want a universal background check, because the federal government will have to enforce it. And if the federal government has to enforce it, the federal government will have a national firearms registry. It's the only, they're not going to tell you that it's a national firearms registry. They're going to say they're going to say it's the Affordable Care Act. No. I'm sorry. I mean, it's the universal background check.
It's funny you should mention that. Throughout the Biden administration, there was this thing going on with the background checks, where there was a zero tolerance policy on certain kinds of errors in filling out a background check. So, excuse me. What they were doing is, you'd have somebody fill out I go in to buy a gun, and I'm going to pass a background check. I'm good to go. Go into a pawn shop, for example, and the guy pulls out the form and he starts filling out the form. And I tell him, okay, my name's Christopher Lowry, and he spells it Lowery. Everything else is perfectly fine, but he put an E in my last name. That's not just a clerical error. They treated it like it was malicious intent. Any clerical error they could find, they treated it like it was done with malice aforethought, and they were shutting down gun dealers all over the country for tiny little clerical errors. And an interesting thing was an even more interesting thing was happening in relation to that. When one of these FFLs got shut down over a clerical error like that, they were forced to hand over all of the records of everyone who purchased a firearm from them to the federal government. That sounds like a hell of a way to put together. In fact, we should call it a ghost registry. They're so hyped up on this idea of ghost guns. We should call that the graveyard registry. Because what it is the government illegally producing a registry of firearms owners. And a funny thing happened. I forget who it was, but one of the guns rights groups was actually filing a lawsuit. Turns out that policy was quietly discarded back in, I think it's been a few days since I read the story. I think it was discarded. I think the policy was ended in November of last year after the election was over. But what happened is one of these gun rights groups was suing the government over the policy, and when they got discovery, they ended up with a copy of the memo that rescinded that policy, and so they had to drop their lawsuit because it was no longer in effect. Be Controversial says, worked in the industry for a bit, and I do agree that it's an unofficial gun registry. Yeah, that's something you can count on the government to do, especially a government full of Democrats, is to just ignore the law. We saw it with the lawfare against Donald Trump throughout the whole 24 campaign cycle, that they don't care what the law is. Now, interestingly,
they lion. Yeah, well, the left lionizes Thurgood Marshall, and I would invite people to go read Thurgood Marshall and take your blinders off as you read Thurgood Marshall. And his most infamous quote, and I can't quote it exactly, but I'm going to get the spirit of the quote correctly, where he said, look, you do what you think is right. And if the rest of the law has to catch up with you, well, then you just let the rest of the law catch up with you, which is quite literally the opposite. The opposite. Yes. So right. They're all about.
He was a judicial activist, bar none. That's why he was such a hero to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who famously explained that Roe v. Wade was bad law. It was decided incorrectly under the law, but it was such an important issue that it had to be done in that way, and it was an important moral victory, because she was an evil whore that wanted to kill and murder babies.
Yeah, they want precedent. That's what they want. They want precedent.
Waller nails it right there. The ATF ignores the law because there's no one to enforce the law against them. The only and that is correct. The only mechanism that exists is for civilians who are victimized by that criminal organization to file suit against that organization and press charges. Every time the ATF takes any action, any civilian involved in that action needs to be filing a lawsuit against the ATF. They need to be calling and filing a report with the FBI and the local sheriff's department. Say, hey, this is an ATF agent. He just asked to see my papers. We still don't like Nazis, right?
Well, according to the left, no, we don't like Nazis.
And according to the right, nobody likes Nazis, right? Almost nobody. I know a guy. So I got one more story in the courts, and then we're going to do some DGUs. Federal Appeals Court strikes down handgun sales ban for 18 to 20-year-olds. I like where this is going. The U.S. Appeals Court has ruled that the decades-old federal ban on licensed dealers selling handguns to adults under 21 is unconstitutional. That is correct. Okay, I can see the idea that there is an age of majority. There's a point at which a person should be expected to say things like, "I'm an adult now, Father. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore." Right? And there needs to be a point. There needs to be an age under which, listen, I'm your dad. I know what's best. You don't know how to tie your fucking shoes yet. Right? If you still don't know that putting a fork in the electric outlet is a bad idea, then I still have work to do. And you're going to have to hang out and listen to me and put up with my shit until you're old enough that if I failed it, then I did. But I at least get the 18 years to try and make you not a totally useless commie shill.
Well, culturally, this one bothers me. Like, you can't buy tobacco or vape products until you're 21, but you could totally vote at 18. You could totally get married, buy a house, get tattoos, get gender reassignment surgery. You could do all this other stuff at 18 years old. But man, Chris, you cannot buy. Wait, Chris, seriously, in most cases, you cannot legally buy alcohol, tobacco, or firearms until you're 21 years of age. Well, that's weird. So I'm happy to see this law, and I don't care what the age is, but there has to be an age. It could be 16, it could be 18, it could be 21, whatever. But at some point, if you's a grown up, then you's a grown up. Like there's, and no, it's gonna.
Oh, you get to stay on your parents' insurance until you're 25. No, look.
26, Chris.
Oh, is it 26 now? Oh, it's 26. Okay. Look. And I agree, 18, 21, or 25. But you know what? It's one of them. It's not a spread, right? We used to joke about it when I was at 16, you get to drive. At 18, you get to smoke and vote. At 19, you can bet on horse races. And you skip a year. At 21, you can drink. And then at 25, you can rent cars. At 25, you're an adult. Right? Pick a date. That's fine. But look, if you can't buy alcohol, tobacco, and firearms till you're 21, you can't vote either.
Which I'd be good with. Which I would absolutely be good with.
Can't join the military yet, and I think that's the one right there. If you can enlist, that's it. At the age at which you can enlist in the United States military, done. You are governed by the Constitution and nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm old enough for you to mail me a draft card, that's I'm old enough to do
Yep.
whatever the hell I want. So yeah. Anyhow, that one bothers me. So anyhow, you got some stories of
So yeah,
of
so
sparkles and
it's
happiness for us,
that
Chris.
happened. And Cameron, I'm glad that you mentioned how much you appreciated that I shouted you out when we had one that dealt with drugs the other day. And this was actually the last one that I pulled this morning because it was the last one I saw when I was looking for DGUs, and I moved it to the top of the stack to make sure we'd get to it. Mishawaka Hotel shooting, self-defense, and drug charges clash.
Nice.
Haven't read it yet. I've just read the headline, so let's see where it takes us. Mishawaka in Indiana. IN is Indiana, right? Yeah. A deadly shooting at the Best Western Hotel in Mishawaka. That's a fun word, Mishawaka. Earlier this week has raised questions about self-defense and criminal activity. Police say 37-year-old Justin Bonham of South Bend admitted to shooting 44-year-old Anthony Corliss out of fear for his life. Corliss was discovered near the entrance of the hotel room with a separate firearm in his hand. Bonham told authorities he acted in self-defense, but the situation grew more complicated when police found methamphetamine and other controlled substances in the hotel room. Bonham was promptly arrested on multiple drug-related charges and remains in custody as the investigation continues. Although self-defense laws in Indiana protect individuals who reasonably believe their lives are in imminent danger, the presence of drugs complicates Bonham's case. And this is going to be the bulk of this conversation right here. This should not be true. Investigators will likely examine whether Bonham's actions were justifiable or influenced by the criminal activities reportedly taking place at the scene. The discovery of the second firearm in Corollis's possession adds a layer of complexity, as it suggests that both men were armed during the encounter. That doesn't add an extra layer of complexity.
That reduces
the question.
Yes,
if the
that
other
reduces
guy
the
was
complexity.
armed, then the statement "I was in reasonable fear for my life" gets a hell of a lot more believable. Right? The incident also highlights the dangers of firearms in environments where illicit substances are present. Police continue to piece together the events leading up to the shooting while determining the legal consequences Bonham might face. So basically, you got a drug deal going down, and somebody was slinging lead. Now, because this was a DRT fatality, we only have one side of the story, which, by the way, if you're going to claim self-defense, you want to be the only one telling the story.
Yeah,
Dead men don't lie.
They lie still.
Yes.
Yes, there we go. There's your dad joke for the day. Look, I have
lied
said,
his whole life, and now he lies, and he lies still now.
Right. Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear what happened here. Like, if there was meth in the room, there's a whole bunch of assumptions I'm going to go ahead and make that. I'm sorry. I almost had a sneeze. I was trying to let it happen.
Ooh, bless you.
Thanks. Now it's gone. Now it's gone. That's disappointing. No, but I've look, there was meth in the room. There's a whole bunch of assumptions you can go ahead and make. I'm going to make them, okay? That these guys did meth, which kids, meth is bad. Okay? Yeah. Meth is bad. Right? However, just because you're a meth addict, you don't surrender your right to life.
Correct.
You just don't. If there are two people involved in a drug deal and drug dealer A tries to rob drug dealer B and drug dealer A defends himself with violence against drug dealer B, I don't think that should result in felony murder charges ever. I'm I've said it before. I've said it again. I think that's wrong. I'll even go to the most extreme example. Jeffrey Epstein had the right to not get suicided in his cell. He had the right to a trial. He had the right to spend millions of dollars trying to cut a deal that would let him out. And not that I like Jeffrey Epstein, because obviously I don't. However,
well, and obviously
biggest...
the best thing for the public interest would have been for him to go through the discovery and investigation process.
Well, yeah, of course. That's why he
out as much
suicided.
truth as possible, which is obviously why he was suicided.
Right. So if you
Arkansas.
Yes, Arkansas. Yes, very, very good. But if the biggest piece of shit in your society doesn't have rights, none of you have rights. Because all you have to do is move the definition of what a piece of shit is, and now suddenly you are a piece of shit without rights.
Except for communists.
Well, they have the right to get tossed out of helicopters.
Who, according to the Civil Rights Act, are not people.
But yeah, no, they have rights. They have the right to get tossed out of helicopters. Look, that's fine. Yes.
See, and
look,
I'm a little of two minds on this, because when you talk, because what they're going to do here is they're going to try to hit him with felony murder charges, and make the argument essentially that your rights aren't protected because you were engaged in criminal activity. Now, hold on, because I agree with you that the fact that they were engaged in criminal activity, in this instance, does not negate his life, his right to life. But the way that felony murder charges work is the idea is if you go and rob a Stop and Shop or whatever, you go rob a gas station, and the gas station attendant draws his weapon to defend himself, and you kill him, you don't get to claim self-defense based on the fact that he drew his weapon to defend himself, because you were robbing him. You were the inciting incident. And that's the same argument essentially that's made in this case. Now, I would argue back that, and this gets complicated because there are facts that are missing from the case. In a case like this, we may never know, unless there's some kind of surveillance video to be seen. It may be the case that the guy that's claiming self-defense actually drew first. The other drug dealer drew in actual self-defense, and that was the moment where the guy who's claiming self-defense blew him away. Now, like I said before, dead men tell no tales. Dead men don't get the lie. So you're only ever going to get this one guy's side of the story. You're never going to know who drew first. And in a case like this, who drew first is essentially the pertinent fact.
See, I don't know that I would agree with that. I could let's say I'm out in public and somebody's crazy and they're, I don't know, let's say they're ranting on a subway train about how they want to kill white children. Just as an example, for some strange reason. I could see a world where I would draw on that person. I'm not saying I necessarily would, and I'm not necessarily saying anybody listening to us should, but I could construct a steelman argument for why I would draw on that person. Just because you draw first doesn't mean you're not acting in self-defense. Like if somebody walks up to your car while you're stopped at a red light and says, "Get out," I'm not going to wait to see the gun before I get out. I'm going to assume they've already got a gun and they're trying to carjack me. So, I think
those are bad examples, because you're not talking about the question of what, you're not talking about a question in which both combatants drew a weapon, right? In the case of the crazy guy on the subway, his ranting and raving is the equivalent to drawing the weapon. That is the incident that created the situation where the reasonable concern happened. And in the case of the road rage incident, then the one who pulled over and got out of the car first is the one who's inciting the actual conflict. So in both of those cases, what you have is in both of those cases, assuming that the nut job on the subway and the chick that got out of the car in the middle of the road aren't pulling a gun in that situation, they are still the original initiators. So when you get back to the example in the gas station, that they are armed is not the salient factor. That they are attempting to rob the store is the salient factor. So in the drug dealer's case, whether the one who drew first, because the assumption being that before anybody drew a weapon, they were there to meet on mutually agreed terms to engage in, however extrajudicial it might be, however extra legal it might be, they were there to engage in a contract for mutual benefit. Whoever drew the weapon first, or attacked first, or said, whoever started the incident is the one that incited the incident.
I guess what I'm trying to say is drawing your weapon doesn't necessarily have to be the initiation point. Like you could have a good reason to feel like you need to draw your weapon, even if you haven't seen someone else use one.
Yes.
So I actually think we agree. We're just coming at it from different angles. And look, this was in a hotel room. I guarantee you both of these guys did meth. Like, I don't think there's any question about that. It sounds like the guy that was shot came to the hotel room to purchase meth, steal meth, whatever. Something happened. It's probably, once you're in someone else's space, someone else's house, someone else's hotel room, someone else's car, once you invade that space, most states where their legal systems have a shred of sanity, treat your car or your house or your vacation property or your hotel room or whatever as your castle, as the place that you would defend. So, like it even if, I'm just going to leave it there. I still think that the guy that was shot coming to the hotel room was probably in the wrong, because even if the guy in the hotel room was also in the wrong, well, all you got to do is turn around and leave the hotel room. Like, if I go over to your house, Chris.
I agree. No, I agree that, so in this story, ostensibly what we've got is two guys committing crime, but like I said, this crime is, a voluntary contract for mutual benefit. They're one of them selling drugs, one of them's buying drugs. It's a nonviolent crime. And then one of them decided to make it a violent crime. My earlier point was that it's going to be treated like felony murder under the same premise, based on the idea that if you have initiated the crime, then so two guys go to rob a gas station together, right? And the old man behind the counter pulls out his hog leg, blows one of them away, and the other one runs, gets arrested. The one that got away, the criminal that got away, is going to be charged with felony murder, because the legal argument is that because they initiated the crime where a justified homicide occurred, then as co-conspirators to that crime, they are individually responsible for the other one's death if that should happen. Contrary-wise, if they actually manage to kill the old man before he can blast one of them, they don't get to use self-defense as a defense against murder charges because they initiated the crime. Well, so that's the legal argument that's going to be used when you're talking about two drug dealers. And the argument is they're engaged in a felony, and that makes it felony murder, even if it's like incontrovertibly if he's got video evidence that shows this was a totally justifiable self-defense situation, then the law looks at it and says, you know what? You're right. It was a totally justifiable self-defense situation, except that it only occurred, the circumstances only existed because you were engaged in the commission of a felony. My point is not to say that that's correct or justifiable. My point is to say that's how we get to this point where we're asking the question of whether or not that should be the case. I agree that it should not be the case, but it's not a totally unsound argument either.
Yeah, again, I think we agree more than we disagree. We're just coming at it from,
Generally, yeah, I think so.
Can we squeeze in one more? We're being shamed in the comments. Apparently, despite talking about gun-related stuff, we haven't actually talked about guns enough. So
yeah, I don't know how we got to that. I mean, Kash Patel apparently doesn't like the gun registry or the.
Well, we did spend the first 10 minutes talking about knives.
We did. But to be fair, the point is, the British are talking about banning knives because they've already banned the guns, and we did point that out. Stockton man released after fatal shooting and possible self-defense. Stockton, California. Authorities in Stockton are investigating a fatal shooting that may have been an act of self-defense. The incident occurred Monday night near Poplar Street and Madison Street, where officers responded to reports of gunfire at approximately 9:03 p.m. When police arrived, they discovered a 50-year-old man suffering from a gunshot wound. Emergency personnel transported him to a nearby hospital, but he did not survive his injuries. Law enforcement officials located a firearm at the scene and initially detained a 33-year-old individual in connection with the shooting. However, after further review, the person was released as investigators continued to assess whether the shooting was legally justified under self-defense laws. California law permits the use of deadly force in self-defense if a person reasonably believes they are in imminent danger of being killed or suffering great bodily harm. Now, and what that means...
Read the rest of that paragraph.
However, authorities must thoroughly examine evidence, including witness statements, surveillance footage, and forensic findings before determining if the shooting meets the legal standards for justified self-defense. Meaning, if the person you shot is white, then it's self-defense, because we're talking about California.
Oh, see, that's not even where I was going with it. That's just. However, authorities must thoroughly watch. I can take that whole paragraph and boil it down to a couple of words. However, authorities must thoroughly examine the evidence, which, they're going to do that. That's not just a California thing. That's all 50 states. Somebody gets, there's a homicide. Authorities are going to thoroughly examine the evidence.
That's what they're there for. This is a bit of an aside, but
a bit.
And I'll just say it quickly, and I don't think we need to really delve into it, do a whole show on it. It infuriates me that law enforcement are referred to as authorities. They are not. They're public servants. They are not authorities. They only ever have authority if you have been caught committing a crime. Outside of that, they have no authority. Go ahead,
Gary. Don't die. It'd be a hell of a YouTube show, but don't do it, please. I would say there's actually not a lot of important details in this story. But given the fact that they've already released the guy, that it's in California, and I heard, Chris's joke about, the guy must not be white or whatever. I don't think that matters as much to this story. I think if you're in a state like California and they release you, it's probably already self-defense, because blue states deliberately have higher bars to clear for cases of self-defense than red states. So if they've already let the guy go, this is probably legit self-defense and good. And it was at the intersection of Poplar Street and what in Stockton. Like, okay. Again, I'm prepared to make a bunch of assumptions right there. The fact that a 50-year-old man was shot is kind of odd. You don't normally see homicide victims, and yes, that is technically the correct term, even if this was justifiable.
Right, homicide.
Even if this was justifiable self-defense. Homicide victims.
Yeah, homicide and murder are different things, Sheriff Levitt.
Right. They tend to not be that old. It's odd to see that big of an age gap. However, sometimes people, like, I don't know, like maybe people named George, go decades living a dangerous lifestyle before they finally
overdose on fentanyl.
Yeah, before they finally push things too far. It does occasionally happen. Most people that live by the sword die by the sword young, and this could just be a case. Right. Just right. Anyhow, the fact that the guy was 50 and was killed is something to pay attention to. Chris, it just occurred to me, we've covered so many of these stories now. We can pretty reliably do meta analyses of what's really going on in these stories, just by what gets included and what does not get included in the story. But
we've been doing the Firearms Friday segment for over half a decade, reliably every Friday, with a very few exceptions.
It's closer to a decade than a half decade.
I said over half a decade. But we're not quite at 10 years on the Daily Show.
Right, I'm clear. I'm just
But we've been doing the Firearms Friday show for nearly a decade. It's 7 or 8. It's 7, 8, 9 years, something like that.
There used to be a whole lot less gray in this hair, and I used to have more hair.
Oh yeah, when we first started doing this, I had a black beard with 2 white strips. I looked like a freaking Marvel comic book villain. No, I'm sorry. A DC comic book villain. No, Marvel. I'm not that dark.
Right. Have we got? It's 8:34. Do you want to try and squeeze another one in?
Let's go ahead and knock out the safety brief. Weather's warming up. Time to crawl out from under the blankets at the house and get out and start cutting firewood, getting ready for the rest of the year. And I say get out and start cutting firewood because I just ran slap out. Sergeant Major came and dropped some off for me, but I got to restock my pile, and it needs time to dry and season and be ready for the next cold spell. That said, we're looking at highs of 70s for the next week. I expect you guys to get out and do some work in the yard, get outside and maybe drive places. Frankly, you're about to go from having been kind of trapped in the house by the weather and the snow here in Georgia. A lot of you were on lockdown for the most recent ice apocalypse, which went way better than the last one, if the news reports are to be believed. But when you suddenly make that transition from, a more sedentary week or two to actively getting out and doing some stuff, keep your ankles attached. Chainsaws are dangerous, but there's yard work out there to do, and you're about to go from having not been active for a while to being active. Stretch, drink water, and try not to sit down on your chainsaw.
Your body needs water.
Your body needs water. also relevant to the change in weather. It's called speed stick. It's not expensive. You got anything you want to say to close, my man?
Nah. Like, guys, have a good weekend. Keep calm and carry one.
Absolutely. Y'all be safe out there. Thanks for watching today. Go ahead and click the link, buy us a coffee. We love you, and we will see you on Monday.
Okay, speaking of coffee, brother,